My name is Suri Cruise. I'm the only daughter of Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes. Today is my 18th birthday. That means I'm old enough to make my own choices now. And today is also the first day I'm brave enough to tell the truth about why my father left my life like I never existed. I got a phone call once. It was from my grandmother. She said my father was dying in the hospital. She asked if I wanted to see him. I hadn't seen him in almost 10 years. People say Tom Cruise is a legend, a superhero, the most powerful man in Hollywood. But to me, he's just a shadow that disappeared when I was 6 years old, and when he left, he took my childhood with him. The whole world sees him smile. They see him run and jump out of planes. They watch him hang off tall buildings and do crazy stunts. But nobody ever asks why the man who can hang off the tallest building in the world is too scared to show up at his own daughter's birthday. Nobody asks why we haven't spoken in 12 years. Nobody asks why there were no phone calls, no letters, not even one "I miss you." Nobody asks why I had to change my last name when I turned 18, why I had to erase Cruz from my life. Have you ever been a little kid at a dance show, watching all the other dads hug their kids while you stood alone, pretending not to be sad? Have you ever told yourself, "Dad's just busy," while deep down you knew the truth hurt way more? Have you ever seen your dad on a movie screen and wondered if he even remembers you exist? I asked those questions thousands of times, and nobody ever answered, until today. For the first time, I'm telling the truth, and it might make you hate Tom Cruise, but I need to say it. People say when babies are born, they cry really loud to say, "I'm here." But I didn't. I was born on April 18, 2006 in a hospital in Santa Monica. The room was super white and super quiet, almost scary quiet. There were no screams, no loud breathing. Even my mom's pain was silent. That's because I had something called a silent birth. My dad believed it would help me keep my pure energy, but to me it was just cold and empty. That's how my life started, silent and empty. They put me on my mom's chest for only a few seconds. Then they took me away, not because something was wrong, just because of a ritual. My mom reached out to hold me longer, but a man in a black suit shook his head. One shake of his head changed my whole life. I've had so many names: Hollywood's princess, America's most famous kid, Tom Cruise's daughter, but the one name I really wanted, my dad's daughter, I never got to have. When I was too little to understand, everyone else spoke for me. When I got old enough to ask questions, they told me to stay quiet. But being quiet doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It just means your heart breaks in silence. It all started in 2012. I was 6 years old. I didn't really understand the word divorce, but I felt it. I noticed my dad's footsteps weren't in our apartment anymore. No more laughter, no more family movie nights. I asked my mom, "Where did Dad go?" She touched my face and said, "You didn't do anything wrong." But kids don't need adults to tell them something's wrong. They just feel it. At 6 years old, I didn't know what Scientology was. I didn't know the news was talking about me everywhere. I just knew one thing: the person I loved most stopped showing up. I remember the last time my dad carried me. The last time we went for a walk. The last time he said my name in that warm voice. I sat in my room hugging the teddy bear he gave me when I was 3, thinking, if I stay really quiet, will Dad come back? That question stayed with me for years. I kept seeing my dad, but only on TV, on red carpets. In movies, I'd think, so he's still out there, just not with me. I didn't know if I should be angry or sad. Kids don't know how to hate like grown-ups do. Kids just know someone's missing. And that empty feeling was so big I could hear it echo even in my sleep. When I turned 10, my question changed. It wasn't "where is Dad" anymore. It was "why doesn't he come?" I didn't have an answer. Neither did my mom, but she tried so hard to fill that empty space. She took me to school, brought me to shows, cooked my favorite food, and held me tight whenever I asked questions she couldn't answer. She never said anything bad about my dad. She never said he didn't love me. But kids are smart. When adults avoid a question, you know the answer is scary. I grew up with two pictures in my head. A dad the world saw as a superstar, and a mom nobody knew had to be strong enough to protect me from every storm. Every time I walked down the street in New York, cameras followed me. But there was one picture nobody ever took, me staring out the window every night, wondering if my dad ever thought about me. That question followed me from age 6 to 12, then to 15, the age when other kids were figuring out who they are, while I was still waiting for a phone call. At school, kids would sometimes ask, "Does your dad even love you?" I laughed. I had to laugh, because if I didn't laugh, I would have cried right there in the schoolyard. I learned to be independent really early, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I taught myself how to ride the subway. I did my own homework. I picked myself up on bad days when nobody asked, "Are you okay?" I grew up in a normal, real world, far away from Hollywood's fancy lights. I wasn't a spoiled princess. I was just a regular girl living with her mom, trying to be normal in a life that wasn't normal at all. But no matter how hard I tried, there were still moments that broke my heart. Like when I saw my friend's dad pick her up after practice. I just stood there watching them hug. My mom came a few minutes later and hugged me. She was the only one I could lean on, my mom, my friend, my everything. By the time I was 17, I got used to not having a dad. But getting used to it doesn't mean it stopped hurting. It just means the pain became part of me, like a scar that doesn't bleed anymore but still hurts when you touch it. Then when I turned 18, I realized something. Staying quiet for too long is like being in prison. That's when I decided to speak up. That's when everything changed. That's when I found my voice. There are truths nobody ever said to me out loud, but I grew up knowing them anyway, like living with a ghost. I remember June 29th, 2012. That's the day my mom finalized the divorce, just 11 days after she filed. People called it the fastest divorce Hollywood had ever seen. Everyone thought it was just adult business. But for a 6-year-old like me, it was the day my whole life got ripped apart, and nobody even asked if I could handle it. I remember that night. My mom closed the last suitcase and sat next to me. She brushed my hair without saying a word. But sometimes silence is heavier than tears. Our apartment felt dark and cold, like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible. And it happened. My dad never came back. In the months after, I started hearing grown-up conversations I didn't fully understand, but I felt them in my heart. Scientology, control, the child kept far away. Nobody said it to me directly, but kids listen with their hearts. I knew something had pulled my father away, like a strong wind slamming a door just as I reached out. I started school in New York. I didn't follow my dad to movie sets anymore. Every afternoon, the teacher would call Surrey Holmes, and I'd walk forward trying to be strong like my mom taught me. But inside, I wanted to scream, "My name is Surrey Cruz. Where's my dad? Why isn't he here?" I asked myself that question hundreds of times, then thousands, until I didn't even know what I was hopping for anymore. One winter night in 2013, I was 7 years old. My mom wrapped a scarf around me and took me to see a musical. I remember staring at the empty seat next to me. I imagined my dad walking in like a movie hero, showing up right when the lights came on. But the seat stayed empty. That night, I learned something painful. Some hurt doesn't come from being left behind. It comes from hoping someone will come back. When I was 8, I asked my mom, "Did Dad choose them over me?" She turned away fast. Her nose turned red. She said, "Don't ever think that. You were never second choice." But why did she have to say that? Why would a mom need to tell her kid that, unless the kid already felt like second choice? In 2015, when I was 9, the news started saying my dad hadn't seen me in years. Some articles said Scientology had strict rules about people labeled outsiders. When I saw a newspaper with the headline, "Surrey grows up without her father," I hid it under the couch. I didn't want Mom to feel sad, but the truth was she already knew. And so did I. My mom tried so hard to give me a normal life. Simple meals, walks in the park, ballet lessons. She wanted me to have a real childhood, not one full of sadness. But on quiet evenings, I'd hear her sigh. The kind of sigh that comes from a woman raising a kid in the shadow of a man who shines too bright. Once I heard her talking to my aunt on the phone. Her voice was soft but breaking. She said, "I just want her to be at peace. I just want to protect her." That's when I understood. There were battles my mom fought quietly so I'd never have to. When I was 12, I started to realize I was different from my friends. Nobody understood what it felt like to grow up with a dad the whole world knew, except his own daughter. I saw my dad on the big screen, at fancy events, laughing in interviews, and I thought, when millions of people clap for him, does he know the little girl who used to hold his hand only sees him on a screen now? And does he know I'm watching? In 2020, I was 14. The pandemic shut down the world. My mom and I stayed home for months. It was a time that forced people to face what's inside them. One evening, I asked my mom, "If I want to change my last name one day, would you be sad?" She looked at me for a long time. She didn't cry, but her eyes told me she knew I'd been thinking about that for a while. We didn't say anything else, but I understood. The pain wasn't about my dad leaving anymore. It was about me learning how to live without needing him to come back. When I was 16 in 2022, I was thinking about college. I wrote an essay for an arts program. It was the first time I told the truth. I wrote, "I grew up with an absence nobody explained, and I learned that sometimes people aren't there, not because you're unworthy, but because they're afraid to face themselves." I didn't say my dad's name, but the whole world understood, and what hurt most, nobody disagreed. At 18, in 2024, I stood in front of the mirror on my birthday, and I saw myself, not as Tom Cruise's daughter, but as a girl who survived a lot of pain, a girl who loves her mom more every day, a girl who's thankful for the normal life her mom fought to build, a girl who finally found her voice. That's when I decided to tell everything, not to blame anyone, not for revenge, but to finally let the truth come out of the dark. I know some people will be angry, but staying silent any longer would have drowned me in a question that never got answered. Why did Dad leave? And the answer, or at least the start of it, is what I'm sharing now. There are things I was too scared to touch for years, like they were fire. One of those things is the real reason my father and I are so far apart. Scientology. I remember October 2012. I was only 6. A friend of my mom's said in front of me, "Tom can't see the girl if she's not part of the organization." I stood there frozen. I didn't know what organization meant. I just knew one thing. It was the reason I couldn't see my dad. I ran to my room and cried until my mom lifted me into bed and held me. She said, "You didn't do anything wrong. You're not the reason." But how can a kid believe that when their father disappeared? When I was 7, I realized my dad's silence didn't feel like busyness anymore. It felt on purpose. I saw photos of him in London, Iceland, on movie sets, taking pictures with fans, running, jumping, smiling. And I asked myself, if he can hang off the tallest building in the world, why can't he walk up to my front door? That question stayed with me for years. I know some people will say he was just busy, but nobody's schedule is too busy for 12 years. Nobody's so busy they can't send one birthday message. Nobody's so busy they can't ask their kid if she's okay. I learned from broken conversations that Scientology has rules most people can't understand. They say the group doesn't want members staying close to people who don't belong. A kid like me, growing up with my mom, living in New York, going to public school, not following Scientology, I knew exactly which side of the wall I was on. In 2015, when I was 9, I saw my mom sitting in the kitchen, hands shaking, reading an article. I walked over and asked, "Did Dad mention me?" She folded the paper fast. "Let's go get breakfast, honey." When adults dodge a question, kids know right away the answer would hurt, and it did. He hadn't mentioned me. The last time he spoke about me publicly was in 2013. That was the last time. The silence didn't feel like distance anymore. It became a void. My friends grew up with dads picking them up, coming to concerts, showing up at graduations. I didn't. I saw news of my dad flying helicopters, jumping out of planes, doing dangerous stunts. But what about me? Was it too much to ask for him to watch me dance ballet just once? In 2020, when I was 14, I started asking questions, not just about my dad, but about Scientology itself. I searched for everything. I watched shows, I read interviews, and I hated to admit it, but I saw myself in those stories, not in words, but in absence. That organization never said my name, but I was the price paid for the 2012 divorce. I was the child left outside. And what does outside mean? It means I wasn't allowed into my father's life anymore. I didn't dare ask my mom. I didn't want to hurt her, but I could feel her tension every time Scientology came up, like it was a shadow she fought hard to escape. Sometimes when she thought I was asleep, I'd hear her whisper on the phone, "I did the right thing. I have no regrets." Right for who? For me. And that made me feel grateful and heartbroken at the same time. In 2023, when I was 17, one thought kept me up at night. Tom Cruise had been absent from every big moment of my life. My first ballet show, my dance competition, my middle school graduation, my sweet 16, every milestone kids hope their dad will be there for. I saw him at Hollywood parties, standing next to famous actors, but there was no picture of me on his phone, at least none I ever knew about. That same year, a journalist asked Tom Cruise about me. He just smiled, that familiar, polite smile, and said, "I always love my children." But is it love if you haven't seen your child in 12 years? Is it love if you've never shown up at her school? Is it love if you let an organization stand between a father and his daughter? I don't have the answer, and that uncertainty hurts the most. The big moment came in April 2024 when I was filling out my college application. I got to the box that said last name. I paused for a long time. People think changing your last name is about pride. But for me, it was the final statement from a daughter who waited 12 years for her father to show up, and he didn't. I wrote Surrey Noel Holmes. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But all I felt was relief, like I finally cut the last thread connecting me to a man who chose silence over watching me grow up. When I submitted my college essay, My professor said it was one of the most honest pieces he'd ever read. In it, I wrote just one sentence that made everyone go quiet. I didn't grow up without a father. I grew up with a father who couldn't walk toward me. I didn't say Scientology. I didn't say divorce. I didn't say disappointment. But the truth lived in the silence between the words. And looking toward the future now, as I step into adulthood at 18, I know I'm no longer the child sitting by the window waiting for someone to show up. I don't look at the empty seat next to me in the theater anymore. I don't ask my mom if dad will call. I don't check my phone on my birthday. I don't hope anymore. And I don't blame anymore. I have only one thing left, the truth. And next, I'm going to tell you all about Katie Holmes, the woman who fought alone to pull me out of things adults are too afraid to admit. Part 2, the woman who saved me. There are truths I understood so late that looking back, I feel like I owe a debt for my whole life. That debt is to my mother, Katie Holmes, the woman who stood alone in the middle of a storm, under the eyes of millions, against the power of one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, just to protect me. People always ask, is Surrey angry at Tom Cruise? But nobody ever asks, what did Katie Holmes sacrifice to save her daughter? And yet it's those sacrifices that are the reason I'm still here, still me. I remember clearly, June 15, 2012, 3 weeks before my mom filed for divorce. She took me out for ice cream on Houston Street. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes kept looking behind us like someone was following. I didn't understand. I just saw that she was so tense, even the smell of vanilla made her sick. Back then, I didn't know, but now I do. She was planning how to get me out of a life she believed would swallow me whole if she didn't act immediately. People called it an escape. I call it the last breath my mother gave everything to take back. One night when I was 4, my mom held me while I slept with all the lights off. She later told me she was afraid there were hidden cameras in the house, afraid someone was watching my every breath, afraid someone might decide I belonged somewhere she would never allow me to go. When I asked, "Mom, what are you afraid of?" she just said, "I'm afraid of losing you." I didn't understand then, but now I do. My mother wasn't just afraid of losing custody. She was afraid of losing my soul. I know many people don't believe Scientology has that much power, but I remember my mom locking 3 different doors every time we came home. I remember her constantly changing phones, passwords, and schedules. I remember how she avoided eye contact with strangers on the street, like every glance might mean danger. When I asked, "Why do you look scared, Mom?" she just held my hand tighter, but the fear in her hand trembled with mine. On June 28, 2012, the night before the divorce filing became public, my mom woke me up at 11 p.m. The only light in the apartment came from the kitchen. She whispered, "Surrey, we have to go now." She didn't cry. I did out of fear. But now, looking back, I understand. That was the night she chose to give up her career, her fame, her wealth, her private life, all to fight for custody of me. That was the night she became a warrior. I heard adults whisper that my mom had used military tactics to get out of that marriage. I didn't understand those words as a child, but I understood how tightly she held me in that taxi, how her head leaned against the window, how her eyes stayed locked on the rearview mirror like she feared someone was following. I heard her breathing, soft, fast, and tired. A week later, she told me, "Surrey, from now on, you'll go to school in New York. You'll make new friends." She said it like it was just a simple decision. But later I learned she gave up everything in court just to make sure I wouldn't have to grow up inside Scientology, wouldn't have to go through a kind of childhood she believed would break me. People call that protection. I call it loving someone so much you sacrifice yourself. In 2013, when I was 7, my mom went back to Broadway, but she never stayed more than a few hours away from me. After every show, as soon as the applause ended, she rushed home before I fell asleep. Once I asked, "Mom, can you do a movie?" She just smiled. "I'll do it later." But she never did. She turned down dozens of scripts, millions of dollars, countless career opportunities, because she knew one thing: I couldn't survive one more absence. When I was 10, I accidentally read an email my mom wrote to her best friend. "I always have to be strong in front of her, but some nights I cry because I'm afraid she'll think her dad doesn't love her." I remember standing at the kitchen counter looking at her phone screen, my chest tightening. I had never seen my mother that vulnerable. From that moment I understood. My mom's love wasn't soft love, it was battle love. During my teenage years, my mom always told me, sometimes silence is a form of love. I didn't understand what she meant until I was 16, when I asked her, "Do you regret leaving that marriage?" She looked at me for a long time, then answered slowly, "Sweetheart, I didn't leave a marriage. I saved us." I didn't ask anything else. I didn't need to, because that was the first time she put into words what she had carried in silence for so many years. In 2022, when I was 16, I started to see my mother smile more. Her smile wasn't tight and forced anymore. I saw her drink coffee in the morning sunlight instead of closing the curtains. I saw her walk slower, no longer looking over her shoulder. I saw her wear light makeup, dress the way she liked, choose the roles she wanted. And I understood we had made it out. We had finally escaped. I know a lot of people want me to speak badly about my dad. I won't. I don't know his whole story. Maybe he hurt in his own way. Maybe he was torn between his beliefs and his responsibilities as a father. But what I do know for sure is this: my mother carried everything else. She bore the pressure of the media. She faced the judgment. She endured the hate for leaving a marriage with one of the most powerful superstars in Hollywood. She carried my father's silence in my place. She carried the responsibility of raising me, teaching me, protecting me, being my shield and my foundation. She was the only one standing in the middle, keeping me from being hurt even more. And only when I grew older did I realize that kind of strength doesn't come from nowhere. It was built from the nights she couldn't sleep, from the times she held me while I cried because I missed my dad, from the moments she had to answer questions she herself didn't have answers to. Why doesn't Dad come visit me? I used to think my mom was cold for cutting all ties with Hollywood, but it wasn't because she feared Hollywood. She feared losing me. And what people don't understand is this: sometimes, to keep your child, a mother has to walk away from an entire world. In 2024, when I decided to change my last name, I didn't ask my mom. I just told her after it was done, "Mom, I want to carry your name." She didn't cry, but her voice cracked when she said, "I'm proud of you." That's a sentence I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Part 3: Finding my voice. I never thought I'd have the courage to say the things I buried deep inside for 12 years. But it turns out every girl eventually reaches the moment when she has to face her own pain. For me, that moment came in April 2024, on the day I turned 18. People call 18 the age of adulthood, but to me, it felt like the day I had to pull myself out from under the longest shadow of my life, the shadow named Tom Cruise. I don't hate my dad, but I'm no longer running from the truth. And the truth is, I grew up without a father, not because he couldn't be there, but because he chose not to be. In early 2024, I started working on my college application. I spent weeks on my essay, writing, erasing, crumpling up drafts, like each word was an old wound reopening. I wanted to write about music, about art, about the things I love. But in the end, I found myself staring at a blank page and writing a sentence that made my hands shake. Sometimes we don't grow up with love. We grow up with the space that love leaves behind. I had never said that before, not even to my mom, but writing it down made my heart feel lighter, so I kept going. I'm the child of a man the whole world knows, but not the man who watched me grow up. I didn't need to write his name. People would understand. I understood. And for the first time in my life, I felt like the one holding the pen to my story. Not the media, not the rumors, not the headlines I used to read as a 7-year-old. Me. I remember the night I finished the essay. I printed it out, placed it gently on the table, and sat down. My mom was cooking dinner in the kitchen. I walked over and handed her the paper. She wiped her hands, opened it, and read. Every line cut into her heart, but she didn't cry. When she reached the last sentence, she placed the paper down, looked at me for a long time, and said, "You found your voice." Just one sentence, but my whole body felt like it had been freed from a weight I'd carried since I was 6. A few weeks later, I did something I knew the world would notice, but something I could no longer avoid. I changed my last name. On May 17th, 2024, when I signed the paperwork with the name I chose, Surrey Noel Holmes, I felt my chest tremble, like someone had finally unlocked a door that had been shut for years. For 12 years, I carried the name Cruz without a single phone call, a single hug, a single birthday wish. I always waited for my dad to come find me. But on my 18th birthday, I realized I'm not the one who needs to wait anymore. I have the right to choose who I am. Many people said my name change was a public rejection of my dad, but the truth isn't that harsh. I didn't change my name to erase him from my life. I changed it to become fully myself, not defined by the man who once ruled the entertainment world, but by the woman who raised me, protected me, and loved me enough to stand up against a powerful organization. My mother. I wanted to carry her name. I wanted to stand beside her. I wanted my name to come not from a legacy of abandonment, but from the love that saved me. When the media started reporting on the name change, I wasn't surprised. I knew they would talk. But what did surprise me was how people responded. So many messages, letters, and comments from people I'd never met, telling me they were proud of me for standing up for myself. One girl wrote, "You did what I wish I had the courage to do with my own father." An older woman messaged, "I'm 60 and still haven't healed from the pain of being abandoned by my dad. You did it." For the first time, I realized my pain wasn't a weakness. It was the thing that connected me to others. But do you know what hurts the most? It's not my dad's absence. It's not the headlines. It's not the rumors about Scientology. The most painful thing is, he's still silent. No phone call, no message, not even an 18th birthday wish. Silence, just like the past 12 years. I thought that would break me, but strangely it made me stronger. It made me realize I can't keep waiting for an apology that may never come. I have to heal on my own, stand up on my own, put an end myself to this story that has gone on too long. The day I submitted my college essay, it felt like I was sending off a part of my childhood. A childhood full of empty spaces. A childhood full of rumors. A childhood full of questions no one ever answered. But also a childhood filled with my mother's love. When I hit submit, I knew I was stepping into a new chapter, one where the past no longer controls me. One afternoon in June, I sat in Washington Square Park, watching children run around the fountain. I used to be like them, carefree, believing I belonged to someone. Now I belong to myself. I opened my journal and wrote a sentence I want to read again when I'm 30. The silence of others is not my fault. My pain is not something I have to carry alone. And I believe it. For the first time in my life, I truly believe it. The day I got my college acceptance letter, my mom hugged me so tightly. I hadn't seen her that happy in years. I knew that my success wasn't just the success of an 18-year-old girl. It was the victory of both of us. After more than a decade of surviving darkness, rumors, pressure, and silence. My life begins here, without a father in it, but with me, with my mother, with the people who love me, and with the truth. Not truth for revenge. Truth so I never have to hang my head when I look back on my childhood. I was once the child left behind. Now I'm the one walking forward. And that's the biggest difference in my life. Send me a heart if you're crying for me. Red.